welcome in this week, Who's the Champ? You know, over these past few months, I've had the opportunity of interviewing some of the great upcoming, some of the present best wrestlers, greatest wrestlers that anyone could ever think of. And, you know, when you think of professional wrestling, there's one name that's synonymous. A couple of weeks ago, I sat down with C.W. Anderson and Brock Anderson. And then I was given the opportunity to do one of the greatest things that I had to absolutely say that it's amazing. I get the chance to sit down and talk with the enforcer, Arn Anderson, from the Four Horsemen, one of the greatest TV champions of all time. You know, and here we go. You know, I don't want to waste any more time. Let's just jump right into it. Arn, I want to welcome you being with me this week. But before we get into your career, we need to step back into the past. A great voice in professional wrestling passed away, Mr. Bob Caudle. Bob was a great voice. Even when I was growing up, I still, as I'm talking to you right now, I can hear his voice. One of the greatest voices in professional wrestling ever. You were very close with him. Can you share some of your memories and thoughts of Bob Caudle?
It just came across. I first met him was 85 when I went to work for Jim Crockett Promotions, and Mr. Caudle was doing the commentary at that time. He just came across as just such a class act. He just added so much to the show as far as not just wrestling, but he could have been talking about race car driving or baseball or football or whatever. He just was very, very good and very, very classy and just a nice gentleman.
You know, absolutely. I met him back in the Smoky Mountain days. And, you know, as we were talking about the voice, what a great voice that he had. You know, when we talk about voices in wrestling, two of the names now that, you know, a lot of people, they talk about Michael Cole, they talk about, you know, JR and Jim Ross and Jerry King Lawler. You know, two other names that actually come up for me that I always remember is Jim Ross and Tony Schiavone. What two great voices they were.
Yes, I do. They're so distinctive. And when you've heard Tony Schiavone once, it's like Mr. Caudle or JR. They're very distinct. Gordon Soley may have been the best of all time, all around.
Oh, absolutely.
And it was very definitive when you heard those voices. You knew who you were talking about.
Mm-hmm. I totally agree. What a voice of Gordon Soley. What an absolute voice. And to this day, I'll never be able to hear the word souffle ever again. You know, he always brought, like, one of his greatest phrases was, you know, a brawl at the Pier 6. I absolutely love them. But, you know, we could talk about Gordon Soley, JR, Bob Caudle all day, all night, you know. But let's talk about you. You know, you're one of the staples here in professional wrestling. You know, when the greatest comes up, your name comes up. So how did it all start for you? Did you grow up as a wrestling fan?
It was virtually impossible. It was a closed society. The earliest I can remember is I'm about 8 years old. I grew up in Rome, Georgia, so I would get the Atlanta wrestling, TBS, and that was what I grew up on. And from about eight years old up, I just wanted to be a wrestler. And I can't remember ever wanting to have a B plan or do anything else. So it was just, and to this day, I'm still a huge fan.
Oh, absolutely. There's so much great stuff going on out there. Well, one of the things is that, you know, I spoke with your son, Brock, and I spoke with CW about the name Anderson. So as I do my research and also watching you over the time, you started off as Mr. Olympia, and when you got into Jim Crockett Promotion, you became Arn Anderson. Can you tell me the transition into becoming an Anderson?
Well, there was a little bit of, there's an order of the events. When I first got a break, I went to Pensacola, Florida for 3 weeks, wrestled for Bob Armstrong. Then I went to Bill Watts. I was there about 5 months, Mid-South Wrestling. Then I came back to Georgia Championship Wrestling with Matt Bourne as a partner and Paul Ellering as our manager.
Wow.
That's where I became an Anderson. I left Bill Watts and went to JYD. Actually, was the guy responsible for me becoming Anderson at a meeting, and they were talking about Matt Bourne getting a partner going to Georgia and all that, and JYD went, "Yeah, Bill." We're all sitting around the TV locker room. "Why don't you just send Lundy over there? He looks just like old Anderson." And Watts looked around at me like he'd seen me for the first time. You know, he said, "Damn, JY, that's a great idea. Let's do that." He said, "I'll get back to you." And a week later, I had a starting date, and that's where I became an Anderson. And it was not lost on me what a gift becoming an Anderson was. I mean, you're talking about a launching pad.
Oh yeah.
And so we spent about 6 months there. Then I went to Pensacola. Things didn't work out that great. Went to Pensacola, and I was there 14 months, and that I attribute to learning my skills, my craft, because you were wrestling in same town every week.
Mhm.
So it was reps after reps. You have to pay attention what you did last week or the week before, what you're planning on doing the next week, because when you're there every week, they follow the story. And that was when the business was storyline driven.
You know, absolutely. I've heard a lot of the people back from the NWA talking about that, how, you know, you wrestle pretty much in the same towns, in the same loop. And so you couldn't do the same match every single where. And like nowadays you can. You know, people in Baltimore at a house show can see a match and they could do the same one here in Charleston. So, you know, that's great wrestling psychology. But one of the things that you actually are known for is you're considered one of the greatest talkers that ever stepped inside the ring or stepped at a podium or behind a microphone. You know, the young kids now, they know of The Rock. They know CM Punk's pipe bomb, you know, John Cena, all these great talkers, but you're one of the original great talkers. Was this something that you had a niche for, or did you eventually have to mold yourself into doing this?
I got to be honest with you, I think it was out of necessity. When I went to Jim Crockett Promotions, I pretty much had my legs up under me with promos and matches. And like, you know, I wrestled 300 and something times that, you know, while I was down there the 14 months. So you get a lot of practice.
Mhm.
And then when I went to Jim Crockett Promotions, and that first time when we were all on the promo together, it was myself and Ole were in a tag match. Ric Flair had a match. Tully had a match. JJ was in managing Tully at the time, and we were just happened to be in those days. You had 3:30 interview time, and you would sometimes get put out there to share that time with different talent. And to be honest with you, when we all walked into that group, before I ever had another thought, I just looked around and there's Tully Blanchard, one of the biggest heels of all time. People hate Tully. Ric Flair, who was the flashiest guy of all time. J.J. Dillon, who was a very articulate speaker. Ole Anderson, who could make you believe he was a bad, because he was. And I'm looking around, I'm the rookie now. I'm thrown in this group of guys, and I'm looking around and go, what am I doing here? This stands out like a sore thumb. What are you going to do? What am I going to do to separate myself from all of these guys, much less all of our opponents? And, you know, I just kind of said, well, don't try to go higher, and don't try to jump higher, don't try to dribble faster. Find your lane and say something that every person, from the 8-year-old and his friends that are watching wrestling to the grandfather that grew up on it, and find something in between that you can say that they'll go, hey, I get that. And I kind of stuck with that theme my entire career. Don't scream and holler, don't spit all over the TV, don't act like some maniac. So that when you do have that one meltdown, whenever it is, people know, oh, now this is really serious. But I just kept it, tried to be articulate, tried to be semi-intelligent, and just talk to people like they could deal with and understand.
You know, It's a great example of what you just said. And I didn't know if I was gonna bring this up, but since you put it that way, keeping your voice high, keeping it low, knowing what to say, keeping a steady rhythm. One of the things that, and you said, bring them in until they know, oh no, that's serious. And one of the greatest promos that I would have to say that, you've done that actually solidifies that is we all heard you say all different kind of promos. But one seemed very personal. There's one with the Midnight Express where you were just going off. You were talking about bringing the little girl to the table for Bobby. And the quote from Stan, which I thought was absolutely great towards him, was said, "Stan Lane, you've chased women all your life. You become one." That is absolutely great. What is that promo a prime example of what you were just talking about?
I think so, because now it was personal shots.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't, hey, I'm a wrestler and I'm better than you and I'm going to beat you and here's why. It was a personal shot, and it had a different tone to it. And anybody that knew Stan or Bobby or me or Tully or whoever, they knew that what they were hearing was legit. It wasn't just trying to, get over on somebody on an interview. It was reality based. So,
one of the greatest things about you, Arn, is everyone loved the wrestling titles. They absolutely did. And I remember the big gold title. And, everyone always wanted that. But it was somewhere when it was introduced with the NWA TV television championship, it was something about it, that silver and red. I absolutely loved it. How do you feel about being considered one of the greatest TV champions of all time? Tell me your feelings on the belt.
Well, I looked at that TV title and then I looked at Rick, and I knew that my position as the enforcer, people asked, why they call you the enforcer. I did all the dirty work. And I was that guy that was always in a position that if Rick got in trouble and it looked like he was going to lose that title, I was the stopper. I shut it down. So then when I won the TV title and I started going out every week, you had a responsibility to wrestle every week on TV, 9 o'clock in the morning, sometimes for 20 minutes, 20-minute time limit. And that was tough. And it was a grind. And nobody, to be honest with you, in those days really wanted to go out first thing in the morning and fight Ronnie Garvin or the Road Warriors or whoever it may be at 9 in the morning, just get your brains beat out. I embraced it. I enjoyed it. And it became my world title because, once you go out there and that bell rings, if you've got a 15-minute time limit, you got to go 15 minutes if it warrants it. And I just made it my world title. I never looked back. And we're still talking about it today. So apparently it worked.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's hard to explain. When watching Arn Anderson in the ring, you've had so many signature maneuvers, from the gourd buster, where you're picking someone up and dropping them on their face. That DDT, absolutely wonderful. Forget Jake Roberts, but that DDT, the way you snapped and the way you dropped someone was absolutely great. And then no one can forget the spine buster. Anytime the name spine buster comes out, your name comes up. If I remember correctly, you are the originator of that move. How did it come to be, and why is it one of your favorite signature moves?
Absolutely. And before I left Bill Watts, I was wrestling long-term friend of mine, Tim Warner.
Mm-hmm.
We were wrestling in a match out in Louisiana. This is before I ever made it to Georgia. And I shot him in and basically just grabbed a bear hug and took him up and was just going to hang on to him and shake him. But if you can picture it, if you take my hands who were locked underneath his back and slide the right one around his hamstring and slide the other one up a little bit, Now he would be clear because his legs were in between mine, that I could rotate him and make a bump out of it. And it literally just fell into place in my mind, kind of like the Horseman promo for the first time. People ask me, how long did you have to work on that? Not at all. It just popped in my head. Same thing for this. And it just felt so smooth. And the impact was easy on me, not so easy on him. So it had all the markings of a top-notch finish.
Absolutely. And still one of the most repeated moves ever. Everyone does a spine buster, but no one does it like an Anderson. So when you hear the name Arn Anderson, well, we're in the month of November. And the WWE now, you know, does in the Survivor Series, they do WarGames. But you can't talk about WarGames without talking about the Horsemen. And, you know, yourself, you know, you did it in different adaptations of with the Horsemen and with the Stud Stable. So you are the king of WarGames. Can you tell me, you know, some of your favorite, your least favorites? Tell me about WarGames.
None of them are my favorites. Those guys beat us to death. There was nowhere to escape. Once you came in and that door locked, I mean, you couldn't crawl out the top, which traditionally in a cage match, that was your escape route sometimes. It was just, WarGames was 2 cages of no escape. And once you got that thing full of guys, oh Lord. I was the guy that started, I don't know how many people know this, all the WarGames except one.
Wow,
which
okay.
if you go back and look at that list, I think we had, one year we had 26 WarGames or something. Started with Dusty, a lot, different guys, but I was the starter for our team, and man, whew, no fun. But it did settle a lot of scores because you couldn't, the real key to this thing was conditioning, because doesn't matter what happened with the first 2 guys that got in there, or the next 2 or the next 2 or the next 2, till all 5 guys were in there, you couldn't have a conclusion to the match. So you had to think about that, pace yourself, don't get in there and get bloodied up and hurt first thing, because you got to be there to the end anyway. So there was such a strategy to it.
Absolutely. There had to be a strategy. You were just saying that you did, you started all the WarGames except one. Why didn't you start that WarGames?
Well, I couldn't. It was one of those deals where we almost switched roles. If you looked at WarGames, 2 guys would start, then we would usually get the advantage, which put the good guys in a position to each time now to come in and make a comeback, because they were always down 2-1, 3-2. You know what I'm saying?
Yes, sir.
So it put them in that position really to shine. And they made the mistake of bringing me in next to last. And just because it was there, I ended up DDTing like 4 guys. And I'll just say it, the audience were bad. Even though it was me, the bad guy, making the comeback, they liked the DDT. Well, apparently so do you, which I'm very flattered of. And it went boom, 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 boom. And I came up and gave the audience the floor, and the place went crazy. Well, the good guys figured out we're not going to give him that shine ever again. So those days are over. So that was the one oddball one that did not turn out the way everybody thought it should.
Right now at MLW, you're getting the opportunity to be out in the ring with your son, Brock Anderson. And it's got to be an absolute wonderful feeling to be able to be out there with your son. You know, Dusty Rhodes said in a program one time that there's nothing special than your son picking your vocation. How does it feel to be out there with Brock and watching him go through all this?
Well, I can tell you beyond any shadow of a doubt. Are you a father?
No, sir, I'm not. I'm not.
Well, you don't really have pride until you have a son.
Mm-hmm.
That's my feeling. You can have daughters, which is for guys with our attitudes, probably not a good idea. But when you have sons, you really take so much pride in who they are and what they've accomplished and where they're heading. And when you have one like Brock, who it'd embarrass him, he heard this, but he's one of the best human beings I know. And he has a lot of aptitude for this business, and he's a quick learner. And mostly he's just a good son, a good partner, a good employee, you name it. He's a great kid. To see him getting to live and I've always told him, if you get to live one day in your life and wrestle and come out of it unscathed, and you actually get a payoff, whatever it is, it doesn't matter how much it is, but you earned at least one day in this business, and it is the greatest business in the world. It really is. So I'm very, very proud, and I just try to help him all I can without being that guy that says, here's what I did, do it like this. I want him to have his own style. I want him to have his own victories, his own defeats. The only way you learn in this business is to make mistakes and have a lot of reps. And that's the goal.
Absolutely. You know, one of the great things about legacy is, especially here in the town of Charleston, MLW came to town, and wrestling hasn't been in downtown Charleston in almost 30 years. You know, when we talk about wrestling coming to town, not a lot of people know the legacy and the history of wrestling being in Charleston, starting in, County Hall every Friday night. I would hear stories from my father and my grandfather about wrestling at County Hall, and then it moved to King Street Palace. I started following Mike Mooneyham when I was a young man, and I would hear stories of County Hall and the King Street Palace. And then wrestling moved over to the McAllister Fieldhouse on the Citadel campus. And after that, after WCW pretty much closed down and stopped going to the McAllister Fieldhouse, no major wrestling company would ever come to Charleston. And now, Major League Wrestling has come to Charleston. Tell me the legacy and what Charleston means to professional wrestling.
When I first got to Crockett in '85, it was going through some down times. Mm-hmm. It started to heat up as the company heated up, and it just became one of those towns that really supported wrestling. And when they became a semi-regular town, it just helped because it became like a home team. When you're there, maybe even once a month at one point. It was that good a town.
So Arn, you've had a lot of great matches that I love to watch. You and Muda, you and Sting, but let's talk about one of my least favorite matches. Me being from Charleston, South Carolina, being a huge Horseman fan, it killed me to see you and Ric Flair in a ring together at Fall Brawl. I just couldn't imagine that match. Can you give me, was this something you wanted to do? Can you give me a little insight on this match?
I didn't want to do it. I never wanted to do it, but Rick was going through a period in his career that he felt like he might have been slipping a little bit, and he was dependent on me to dig him out of every mess that he got in. My first response and second response, when he looked towards the floor like, hey, you know what the deal is, put a stop to this, to where I look like, he doesn't appreciate me. He doesn't have a clue as to what I do, and it's almost expected. So the first time I shook him off and said, no, I think he had on a figure four and laid back and reached for my hands, which we had used many times for extra leverage.
Mm-hmm.
And I just shook him. And anyway, it led to a match. He was like a brother to me. And I didn't want to throw hands with my brother. We were as close as pretty much as Bobby and I. just in a different scenario. And, I didn't want to have the match. I don't think a lot of the fans really wanted to see the match. It turned out to be a pretty good slugfest, but I don't think anybody really believed he was going to cripple me or me cripple him. And you take that viciousness possibility out of the equation, it's not nearly as welcoming a match, I think.
Absolutely. So we're almost out of time, and I always ask teams and people that are on here their Mount Rushmore of wrestling, and I want to talk to you about yours. Who would be on your Mount Rushmore? I've been so excited and waiting to hear this. So, on your Mount Rushmore, who would be on it?
Wow. I've been in the ring with some very talented guys. Very talented. Ricky Morton.
Oh, yeah.
Simply because anybody that wrestled Ricky Morton in the day, he's like a 12-year-old kid. The audience got behind him like nobody I've ever seen because he was such a disadvantage in their eyes. I mean, he sold his ass off for everybody. I mean, you could have a riot any night of the week with Ricky Morton being the recipient. I think Ricky Steamboat.
Oh.
Just because it was so new and inventive and innovative and different. Mr. Perfect.
Oh, Kurt Hennig. Yeah.
This one will throw you off a little bit. The best heel I ever saw in the ring was Fit Finley.
Fit, really? Wow. Never thought that.
Go back and pull his TV matches. Pull the one with him and William Regal.
Oh.
Find that match and you'll see what I'm talking about. And to be honest with you, before he ever came to work, he was working over in Europe. Terry Funk had been over there working for Otto Vons. He made it back to the States, and I was talking to him at TV one day. He went, Arn, there's a guy over in Europe who's the best heel I ever. This is Terry Funk talking now.
Right.
Was the best heel there's ever been in this business. He is unbelievable. I said, who's that? He said, Dave Finley. The hell? And it was just localized exposure that he had over in Europe. He had never been to one of the big companies in the States. And then when he came aboard and I saw him have his first match, I went, this cat's different, vicious, malicious, has nothing but ill intent and malice in everything he does. And he's just athletic as he can be. He is. He's the best heel I ever saw.
But he's such a great human being. I met him a few years ago. He's such a nice man. But yeah, in the ring, he was one vicious heel. So we're getting close to the end, and there's no way that I can't have Arn Anderson on the show without asking this one. Everyone has their favorite adaptation of the Four Horsemen. You had some surprises in there with Sting, Sid Vicious, pretty Paul Roma. Won't get into that one. But there's so many adaptations of the Horsemen. So when you hear the name Four Horsemen, you throw up the four. Who is the Four Horsemen to you?
When something is a first time deal and it gets over strong, it's hard to ever eclipse that.
Mm-hmm.
So Ole, that group. But I think mechanically and from an overall talent, overall look, everything, the group with Barry Windham.
Thank you. Absolutely. The Barry Windham, the things that he could do with a superplex, the man that size, just moving around, being a second generation wrestler. I used to always say there was something about Dustin Rhodes and Barry Windham following in the shoes of their fathers, of Blackjack Mulligan and the American Dream. Dustin Rhodes, big shoes to fill, and both of them filled it so well. And I thought Barry fit that dynamic so well. Nothing against Ole, but just when you had Barry in there, you had that young stud. Folks, thanks for joining me this week on Who's the Champ. I can actually say I'm thoroughly enjoyed this one. This is one of the greatest ones that I've done. I hope you enjoyed this show, and I will see you next time.